Music. The Marquis de Lafayette was a French aristocrat and passionate idealist who became the hero of two worlds. Marie-Joseph Paul-Yves Roch Gilbert du Motier, Marquis de Lafayette, was born on September 6, 1757, in the province of Auvergne in south-central France. He came from one of the oldest and most distinguished families in France. Lafayette's family lineage traced back centuries through French nobility. His father, Michel Louis-Christophe Roch Gilbert Paulet du Motier, was a colonel in the French army who died at the Battle of Minden when Lafayette was only 2 years old. His mother, Marie-Louise Joly de la Rivière, died when he was 13, leaving the young Lafayette an orphan and an extraordinarily wealthy one. Lafayette inherited an immense fortune that made him one of the richest men in France. At the age of 14, he became a member of the prestigious Black Musketeers of the military household of King Louis XVI. Lafayette was trained in the traditions of French military service and courtly life. In 1774, at the age of 16, Lafayette married Adrienne de Noailles, a member of one of the most powerful families at the French court. The marriage connected Lafayette to the highest circles of French society and political power. Despite being arranged, the marriage would prove to be a loving partnership that lasted throughout their lives. Lafayette served as a junior officer in the French army, but he found peacetime military service boring and unfulfilling. He yearned for glory and adventure, for a cause that would give meaning to his privileged existence. In 1775, Lafayette heard about the American colonists' rebellion against British rule. The young aristocrat became fascinated with the American cause. He saw in the American Revolution the ideals of liberty and equality that resonated with his own beliefs. Lafayette was drawn to the revolutionary ideas of natural rights and representative government that the Americans were fighting to defend. The French government officially maintained neutrality in the conflict between Britain and its colonies, but many French officials secretly hoped the Americans would succeed in weakening their traditional enemy. In 1776, at a dinner party in Metz, Lafayette met the Duke of Gloucester, the brother of King George III of England, who spoke sympathetically about the American cause. That conversation ignited Lafayette's determination to join the American struggle for independence. Despite his youth and inexperience, Lafayette decided he would sail to America and offer his services to the Continental Army. Lafayette's family and the French court opposed his plan to join the American rebels. King Louis XVI officially forbade French officers from going to America. Lafayette's father-in-law threatened to have him arrested if he attempted to leave France. But Lafayette was determined. In December 1776, Lafayette met with Silas Deane, the American ambassador to France, who was recruiting French officers for the Continental Army. Deane promised Lafayette a commission as a major general. Lafayette used his own fortune to purchase a ship, which he named La Victoire, and loaded it with military supplies for the Americans. In April 1777, the 19-year-old Lafayette defied his king, his family, and the French authorities and sailed for America. He left behind his pregnant wife and his comfortable life at the French court to fight for a cause he believed in passionately. The voyage across the Atlantic took 7 weeks. Lafayette and his companions landed near Georgetown, South Carolina, in June 1777. From there, Lafayette traveled nearly 900 miles overland to Philadelphia, where the Continental Congress was meeting. He arrived in Philadelphia in July 1777, eager to join the fight for American independence. The Continental Congress was initially reluctant to grant Lafayette the commission that Silas Deane had promised. Congress had been flooded with French officers seeking high ranks and generous pay, and many had proven to be more trouble than they were worth. But Lafayette was different. He offered to serve without pay, asking only that he be allowed to volunteer his services to the American cause. Lafayette's sincerity, his enthusiasm, and his willingness to serve without compensation impressed the congressional delegates. In July 1777, Congress commissioned Lafayette as a major general in the Continental Army, though the appointment was initially honorary. Lafayette traveled to meet General George Washington, the commander-in-chief of the Continental Army. The meeting between Washington and Lafayette marked the beginning of one of the most important friendships in American history. Despite their differences in age and background, Washington and Lafayette formed an immediate bond. Washington was 45 years old, a Virginia planter and experienced military commander. Lafayette was 19, a French aristocrat with more enthusiasm than military experience. But Washington saw in Lafayette a brave and dedicated young man who genuinely believed in the American cause. Lafayette saw in Washington a father figure, someone who could fill the void left by his own father's death. Washington treated Lafayette with affection and respect, and Lafayette responded with unwavering loyalty and devotion. Their relationship transcended the military hierarchy. They became like father and son, bound together by mutual respect and shared commitment to American independence. In August 1777, Lafayette accompanied Washington to observe British troop movements. At the Battle of Brandywine in September 1777, Lafayette received his baptism of fire. During the battle, Lafayette was shot in the leg while rallying American troops who were retreating before a British advance. Despite his wound, Lafayette refused to leave the field until he had helped organize an orderly withdrawal. Washington was impressed by Lafayette's courage under fire and his leadership abilities. After recovering from his wound, Lafayette rejoined Washington's army. He spent the brutal winter of 1777 and 1778 with Washington and the Continental Army at Valley Forge, Pennsylvania. That winter was one of terrible suffering for the American soldiers. They lacked adequate food, clothing, and shelter. Thousands of men died from disease, exposure, and starvation. Lafayette shared the hardships of the common soldiers, earning their respect and affection. At Valley Forge, Lafayette became part of Washington's inner circle of trusted advisors. He participated in councils of war and helped plan military strategy. Lafayette also used his connections in France to lobby for French support for the American cause. He wrote letters to French officials and to his influential friends at the French court, urging them to provide military and financial assistance to the Americans. In May 1778, Lafayette led American forces in a successful reconnaissance mission at Barren Hill, where he skillfully extracted his outnumbered troops from a British trap. In the spring of 1778, France officially entered the war as an ally of the United States. The French alliance transformed the Revolutionary War from a colonial rebellion into a global conflict. French military forces, naval power, and financial resources provided crucial support to the American cause. Lafayette played an important role in facilitating cooperation between French and American forces. His fluency in both languages and his personal connections to both Washington and the French court made him an invaluable liaison between the two allies. In 1779, Lafayette returned to France to advocate for increased French support for America. He was received as a hero in Paris. Despite having defied royal orders to go to America, Lafayette was now celebrated for his service to the American cause. King Louis XVI pardoned Lafayette and promoted him to the rank of colonel in the French army. Lafayette met with French ministers and military leaders, urging them to send more troops and supplies to America. His efforts contributed to France's decision to dispatch a large military expedition to support the Americans. Lafayette returned to America in April 1780, bringing news that French troops would soon arrive. Washington gave Lafayette command of a division of Continental Army soldiers. In 1781, Lafayette was sent to Virginia to oppose British forces under the command of Benedict Arnold, the American general who had turned traitor and was now fighting for the British. Lafayette conducted a skillful campaign against British forces in Virginia, using mobility and deception to compensate for his numerical inferiority. He shadowed the British army commanded by Lord Cornwallis, harassing British foraging parties and preventing Cornwallis from achieving his objectives. Lafayette's operations in Virginia helped set the stage for the decisive American victory at Yorktown. In the summer of 1781, Washington learned that a French fleet under Admiral de Grasse would be sailing to the Chesapeake Bay. Washington and the French commander Rochambeau decided to march their combined forces south to trap Cornwallis's army at Yorktown. Lafayette's troops in Virginia prevented Cornwallis from escaping inland. In September 1781, Washington's army arrived at Yorktown and began siege operations. Lafayette commanded one of the 3 divisions in the siege. On October 14, 1781, Lafayette's division participated in the assault on British fortifications that sealed Cornwallis's fate. 5 days later, on October 19, 1781, Cornwallis surrendered his entire army. The British defeat at Yorktown effectively ended major combat operations in the Revolutionary War. Lafayette had played a crucial role in achieving American independence. After Yorktown, Lafayette returned to France in December 1781. He was celebrated throughout France as the hero of two worlds. Lafayette had fought for liberty in America, and he brought back to France the revolutionary ideals of equality and representative government. In France, Lafayette became an advocate for political reform and individual rights. He pushed for religious tolerance, the abolition of slavery, and constitutional limits on royal power. Lafayette became a symbol of the Enlightenment ideals that were transforming Western political thought. He maintained a close correspondence with Washington and other American leaders. Lafayette sent Washington gifts, including a key to the Bastille, which Washington displayed proudly at Mount Vernon. Lafayette named his son Georges Washington Lafayette in honor of his mentor and friend. When the French Revolution began in 1789, Lafayette was positioned to play a leading role. He was elected to the Estates General, the French legislative assembly that King Louis XVI convened to address France's financial crisis. Lafayette became a leader of the moderate reformers who wanted to transform France into a constitutional monarchy similar to Britain. In July 1789, after the storming of the Bastille, Lafayette was appointed commander of the National Guard, the citizen militia of Paris. He designed the tricolour cockade that became the symbol of revolutionary France, combining the red and blue of Paris with the white of the monarchy. Lafayette drafted the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen, modeled on the American Declaration of Independence and the Virginia Declaration of Rights. The Declaration proclaimed that all men are born free and equal in rights, and it established the principles of liberty, property, security, and resistance to oppression as natural and imprescriptible rights. Lafayette sent a copy to Washington, who congratulated him on this charter of French liberty. Lafayette tried to steer a moderate course during the early years of the French Revolution, but France was becoming increasingly radicalized and violent. As commander of the National Guard, Lafayette was responsible for maintaining order in Paris. In October 1789, Lafayette protected the royal family when an angry mob marched on the Palace of Versailles. He escorted King Louis and Queen Marie Antoinette back to Paris, where they were essentially held as prisoners. Lafayette tried to preserve constitutional monarchy and prevent the revolution from descending into chaos and bloodshed. But Lafayette's moderate position satisfied neither the royalists who wanted to preserve the old regime nor the radicals who wanted to completely overthrow the monarchy and aristocracy. In 1791, Lafayette's reputation was damaged when he ordered the National Guard to fire on radical demonstrators at the Champ de Mars, killing dozens of people. Lafayette was accused of being a tool of the monarchy and an enemy of the people. In 1792, as France went to war against Austria and Prussia, Lafayette was given command of one of the French armies. But Lafayette's military position became untenable as the revolution became more extreme. The monarchy was overthrown, and radical Jacobins gained control of the government. Lafayette was declared a traitor and ordered arrested. In August 1792, Lafayette fled France to avoid arrest and probable execution. He crossed into Austrian territory, expecting to be treated as a neutral refugee. Instead, the Austrians, who viewed Lafayette as a dangerous revolutionary, imprisoned him. Lafayette spent 5 years in Austrian and Prussian prisons, held in harsh conditions. He was confined in dungeons, denied adequate food and medical care, and separated from news of his family. His wife Adrienne was imprisoned in France during the Reign of Terror and narrowly escaped execution. Lafayette's imprisonment became an international cause célèbre. George Washington and other American leaders lobbied for Lafayette's release, but they were unable to secure his freedom. In 1797, after Napoleon Bonaparte came to power in France, Lafayette was finally released as part of a prisoner exchange. Lafayette returned to France, but he refused to support Napoleon's increasingly authoritarian regime. Lafayette retired to his estate at La Grange, where he lived quietly during the Napoleonic era. He refused offers to serve in Napoleon's government, maintaining his principles even when it meant political isolation. Lafayette remained true to his republican ideals and his belief in constitutional government and individual liberty. After Napoleon's defeat in 1815, the Bourbon monarchy was restored in France. Lafayette returned to political life, serving in the Chamber of Deputies where he was a leader of the liberal opposition. He advocated for constitutional reforms, freedom of the press, and expanded political rights. Lafayette remained a symbol of revolutionary ideals and popular sovereignty. In 1824, Lafayette accepted an invitation to visit the United States. His tour of America became a triumphant celebration. Lafayette visited all 24 states, traveling more than 6,000 miles over 13 months. Everywhere Lafayette went, he was greeted by enormous crowds who honored him as the hero of the American Revolution. Lafayette met with President James Monroe, visited Thomas Jefferson at Monticello, and spent time with other surviving leaders of the Revolutionary era. The highlight of Lafayette's visit was his reunion with his old friend and mentor George Washington's family at Mount Vernon. Lafayette was deeply moved by the affection and gratitude that Americans showed him. Congress voted to give Lafayette a gift of $200,000 and a township of land in recognition of his service to American independence. Lafayette's visit to America reinforced his status as the symbol of the enduring friendship between France and the United States. When Lafayette returned to France in 1825, he continued his political activities, supporting liberal causes and opposing the increasingly reactionary Bourbon monarchy. In July 1830, revolution broke out in France once again. The July Revolution overthrew King Charles X and established a constitutional monarchy under Louis-Philippe. The 72-year-old Lafayette once again commanded the National Guard during the Revolution. He helped ensure a peaceful transition of power and endorsed Louis-Philippe as the new king. Lafayette hoped that Louis-Philippe would govern as a true constitutional monarch, but he became disillusioned as the new regime proved less liberal than he had hoped. Lafayette resigned from the National Guard in December 1830, ending his public career. Lafayette spent his final years at La Grange, surrounded by his family and visited by admirers from around the world. He remained interested in political affairs and continued to advocate for republican government and individual liberty. On May 20, 1834, the Marquis de Lafayette died in Paris at the age of 76. Lafayette was buried in Picpus Cemetery in Paris under soil from Bunker Hill that his son had brought from America, symbolically uniting Lafayette with the American cause he had served. Lafayette's death was mourned in both France and America. President Andrew Jackson ordered that Lafayette be accorded the same funeral honors that had been given to George Washington. Throughout America, memorial services celebrated Lafayette's contributions to American independence. Lafayette's legacy endures as the hero of two worlds, a man who dedicated his life to the principles of liberty, equality, and representative government. He fought for American independence and helped establish the United States as an independent nation. He championed revolutionary ideals in France and worked throughout his life to advance constitutional government and individual rights. Lafayette's friendship with George Washington symbolized the alliance between France and America that made American independence possible. Lafayette embodied the Enlightenment ideals that transformed the Western world in the late 18th century. His life demonstrated that dedication to principle and willingness to sacrifice for ideals could change history. Lafayette remains a symbol of the universal human aspiration for freedom and self-government, a reminder that the struggle for liberty transcends national boundaries and connects people across continents and generations.